When I looked at my hormonal issues and realized that PCOS is a metabolic disorder at its core, and so I needed to get my blood sugar under control. When my kids came to visit me in the hospital, I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of love. What's really, really important is to get enough protein into your diet. Alcohol, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have positive effects because doing some high intensity interval training, high activity, medium activity, low activity, is how many people went past the first 3 seconds.
Thanks for joining. And today we have in the studio none other than Angela Foster. She is an award-winning nutritionist, health and performance coach. And along with that, she is also the speaker and host of the top-rated global podcast, High Performance Health. And she joins us today on the Payal Nanjiani Leadership Podcast to talk about biohack your way towards success. Angela, welcome to the podcast. It's such an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Payal. I'm honored to be here with you today. Thank you.
So I was reading through your bio, and you were actually in the corporate world. You were, in the world of corporate law, like they say, and then you went through a serious illness, and then you started using integrative health practices, biohacking, to rebuild your physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. How did all of
Yeah.
this happen? What's the journey been like till you got into the wellness industry?
Do you know, it's just such a journey. And I think I'm grateful for every piece of it, as much as it's had its challenges. As you say, I was a corporate lawyer for many years. And I think that I don't know if maybe your audience resonates with this, but in my 20s, I felt really invincible. You know, we have so much energy and, we can talk about why that is later, but we do. And we can kind of push the envelope and burn the candle at both ends. And I was regularly doing that. You know, lawyers have a very work hard, play hard mentality. It's super kind of challenging, but super fun at the same time and very driven. And so I was doing that, but I started to get some hormonal issues that were surfacing that, I didn't fully understand at that point. I was diagnosed with PCOS and endometriosis, and I had to have surgery. And it was really when I was thinking about starting a family that I uncovered these things. And so my first kind of, I guess, foray into the world of health optimization was when I looked at my hormonal issues and realized that PCOS is a metabolic disorder at its core. And so I needed to get my blood sugar under control. And so I was working on that. And then I had this goal of, after surgery, of like, going to start a family, going for that, and going for partnership in the law firm at the same time. And I was like, I'll just see which one of these comes in first. I'm going to hold both of these goals in my mind. And I went for both, and ultimately I made partnership when I was 8 months pregnant with my first child. And because of the surgery and the background hormonal issues, I was encouraged to not leave a big gap between the children so that the endometriosis wouldn't regrow. And so I had my second child. I was 3 months pregnant by the time I finished my maternity leave. And so everything was quite quick, and I wasn't prepared actually for the mental health issues that I would experience. So I had postpartum depression. I'd always been pretty high energy. So that surprised me. And then in the pregnancy with my second child, I remember looking into prenatal depression because I wondered whether this was really a thing. And I couldn't figure out if this was a hangover from my last pregnancy. And that got progressively worse with each child until after my third child, I then 2 years later was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And that's when I found myself in a very difficult place to go on. I'd kind of created this prison in my own mind. I'd given up work. I was raising my family. I'd taken a break from my legal career. And I'd lost my identity, I guess. And we can go into kind of how it manifested for me, but I definitely had created this prison in my own mind where I didn't feel I could go on. I felt that I wanted to, I guess, release my family from me. And even though as crazy as that sounds, but I didn't want to leave my kids without a mum. So I wasn't sure what to do. And that took its toll on my physical health, on my immune health. And ultimately, I ended up hospitalized with double pneumonia, both viral and bacterial. And I was neutropenic. My white blood cell count was so low. And that was really a huge turning point in my life because I'd kind of met that fork in the road, which way was I going to go? And when my kids came to visit me in the hospital, I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of love and feeling that it was kind of a wake up call of what am I doing? Like these kids need a mum and I want to be there to see them grow up. And
Mm,
that's when I made a decision. And, we often talk about the mind, body, spiritual connection.
mhm,
And I witnessed that. It was so powerful, being neutropenic, when you have bacterial pneumonia, antibiotics can help with viral pneumonia is very difficult. And when I made that decision that I am going to get well, I am going to literally get into the best physical, mental, and spiritual health of my life. I need to get out and be a mum to my kids. My
mm.
blood work changed within 48 hours, and they thought they would have to intubate me. They didn't. And actually, I had way less lung damage than they were expecting. And that was what started me on this journey. And then over the next 5 years, I retrained. I was focusing on my physical health. And I started to realize that, I could do these two things. I had high performance and then I had optimal health. But I was like, it can't just be me. How can I bring these worlds together? And
Wow.
that's when the concept of high performance health was born. And I started the podcast. And now I just passionately want to inspire other people to show them that, performance in life, all of your goals, relationships, business, success, everything that you want is
Mm.
really dependent upon exceptional health. And if you prioritize that, you really can have what you want.
I think that's amazing. So I mean, the journey that you have gone through and the way you have crossed every obstacle that has come, when you say about the health practices, the integrative health practices, what does that look like?
On a sort of daily basis.
Yeah.
So I would say there are key areas, right, when we look at health optimization really, or health and performance is
Mm.
sleep is one area, nutrition is another, movement, and then we have recovery or stress management. And those
Mm.
four pillars are really, really foundational. Yes, our metabolic health and hormonal health are all important, but they're kind of dictated to by a lot in large part by our lifestyle, right? So if we focus on the four pillars that we can control. And so for me, fueling your body for high performance is fundamental, right? And that's about understanding how to eat in a way that gives you sustained energy across the day and also cuts out things that we're driven to when we're stressed, which is kind of a natural behavior to crave the wrong types of foods if the brain
Mm.
is, for example, looking for extra energy. So,
Mm.
and we can go into these, but nutrition is a key one. Sleep is really important. And I think, a lot of high performers will, sacrifice sleep like I did as a lawyer. We were regularly pulling all nighters and weekends to get the deal through. I'm not necessarily saying to anyone here who's really busy that I want to massively increase your sleep duration because I know that can be difficult, especially if you, like me, I run a couple of businesses, I've got a family, there's a lot going on. But looking at your circadian alignment is extremely important, and looking
Yeah.
at the quality and depth of that sleep and those metrics is key to health and high performance. And then we look at the way we move our body because movement is really, if exercise could be packaged in a pill, Robert Butler of the Anti-Aging Institute of America said everyone would take it. It is that powerful for our health. It's
Yeah.
so, so important. And again, we can go into what that looks like. And then recovery, like we will never succeed at the level we want to if we do not have physiological and psychological recovery. Both of those things
Oh,
are
I love
important.
that. I think that's so important. I just love the way you said it because most of the people, they do not put the focus on these health aspects, and like you said, once you are going through an illness or you have an health issue, that's when it really strikes that there is some imbalance and we need to make that corrected. So now that you are into these practices, what does your routine look like?
So, my routine. Okay, so should we pick off each pillar and kind of what I do in relation to each one of those and how I work with my clients? So we started with nutrition. If we look at the way we fuel our body, what's really, really important is to get enough protein into your diet. And the reason is because protein gets broken down into amino acids, and those amino acids are the building blocks of life.
Mm.
Everything in your body, your hormones, your neurotransmitters. So if you want to have really good energy, really good brain function. Getting enough protein is fundamental.
Mm.
We also know that from a metabolic health perspective, we see, a decrease in muscle mass and strength with aging, and we see often an increase in fat mass. And having enough protein in combination with exercise is going to help protect against that. Your muscle mass is like a metabolic sink. It's where you dispose of your glucose, right? So it's
Mm.
super, super important on every level. So for me, that's a really fundamental thing. And looking at having somewhere between zero point 0.7 grams and 1 gram of
Okay.
protein per pound of your body weight or target body weight if you're overweight per day, right?
Mm.
So for most people, zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8 grams is a good amount. I also am a big fan of creatine because creatine really has been shown in the literature. It used to be thought of as a kind of bodybuilding supplement. It's the most studied supplement, I think, in the world.
Mm.
Has so much research. And what we're seeing now is the way it affects brain energetics is so important. And especially people who are
Yeah,
vegetarian, for example, they're not going to be getting that creatine from their diet.
true.
And it seems to be at least bone protecting, right, as
Mm.
well. So that's really important. And then alongside that, having an abundance of color and plants, right? Aiming for somewhere between 30 or even up to 40 or 50 plant varieties a week that you can get into your diet. So just thinking, how can I sprinkle a few herbs into this food? How can I add some extra things into whatever sauce I'm making, whether that's onions, garlic, all these types of things, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower,
Yeah.
salad greens, all of these things are so important because they're giving us fiber, but they're also giving us antioxidants. And antioxidants are what help to reduce oxidative stress in the body,
Mm.
which again is associated with aging, but also our gut bacteria consume these polyphenols. They're not just for us. And
Mm.
that helps us to have a healthier microbiome. And a healthier microbiome, a healthy gut, helps with a healthy brain because of the gut brain axis. And so that's really important again for high performance as well as health. And then, we want to have lots of healthy fats that are anti-inflammatory in nature. So oily fish, omega-3s, avocados, avocado oil, walnuts, seeds, nuts, all of these things, olive oil, really, really heart protective and neuroprotective and help to lower inflammation. So I think by focusing on those pillars, what you're doing here is you're crowding out the bad stuff. Because I don't even like to think of food as good or bad. But
Yeah.
if you're focusing on the things I'm saying, you will naturally have higher satiety levels that you're just not going to get the same level of cravings that you would do if you weren't fueling yourself properly. There's also, I believe, a stress component to eating the wrong foods, which we can talk about when we come to
Yeah.
recovery,
Yeah.
that drives that as well. Because if you don't give your brain a rest, if you don't downregulate it, it's going to search, actually we talk about it now, but it's going to search out for foods, I believe, that will then make you recover. So, for example, if we crave high carbohydrate containing foods because we're not fueling appropriately,
Mm.
or we are looking for that glass of wine in the evening that gives that immediate release of GABA and makes you feel calm, right? GABA is a very calming neurotransmitter. That's because we haven't taken care of ourselves enough during the day. And so now we're looking to flick that switch to downregulate our nervous system. We can
Mm.
talk about some stress and recovery strategies that can be woven into the day to help. So that's sort of from a nutritional perspective. I don't want to overwhelm people with too much information, but protein, healthy fats, and abundance of fruit and vegetables are going to be the key things for nutrition.
You also mentioned there is nothing like a good food or bad food. However, we hear so many things that we need to avoid certain foods. If you were to just pick three or four certain foods that, by all means, regardless of the culture or anything, people should avoid, what would those foods be? Or is it that we shouldn't avoid anything?
Well, that's a great question. So when I say I don't like to speak in terms of good or bad, it's because I don't like labeling it in a way because there are some foods that obviously do have a harmful effect on our body.
Okay.
And those aren't really foods. They tend to be ultra processed foods, right, that
Uh,
we've manufactured.
yeah.
So, and they have chemicals in them. But the reason that I think the crowding out is a better approach is because if I label something,
Mm.
almost sometimes we can be more driven to have what we think we shouldn't have, right? Whereas if we crowd out, then we can have a bit of freedom. We know the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule applies in almost every area. So if you are 80 to 90% compliant
Mm.
with this approach, you're going to be doing really well. So what I would say, if there were certain foods that I would say you should limit to a large degree or avoid, they would be ultra processed foods. Alcohol, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have positive effects. The effects are mostly negative. And then obviously, you really do genuinely want to avoid smoking.
Oh, wow. My goodness. I mean, like you said, there are so many out there, and you've just like, literally given us a good ones that we need to keep in track with. And before that, you also mentioned about energy. And you said that for peak performance, you have to have energy to do the things that you want. And that's what you noticed in yourself also. How does one manage the energy? Or how does one keep up to their energy levels at all times?
So another great question. I think that with energy, so a lot of people that I work with in large corporations, in leadership teams, if they're busy, they're not able to always fuel themselves in the right way.
Yeah.
So they're rushing from one meeting to the next. They're going in the morning. They've maybe got the kids off to school. Then they're going on their commute. They'll grab a coffee. Coffee's amazing. It's high in antioxidants and chlorogenic acid and things that are very good
Mm,
for our gut
mm.
and our health in general. However, they might grab a pastry alongside that. And that just begins this kind of blood sugar
Oh my
high and
God. Yeah.
low across the day, right? So it's like, actually, if you're walking into somewhere, could you choose the uh, the Greek yogurt with some seeds or
Mm,
something like that? Something ideally that has a bit more protein, or prepare something at home. So I think there is that, and then people forget to eat lunch, for example. And so what happens is they're not actually getting any quality protein until their evening meal, and that just isn't enough to fuel high performance. They might
wow.
grab a sandwich, but where's all the abundance of that beautiful color in our fruits and vegetables that are
Yeah.
get those are the energy, the life-giving foods. The sun has literally poured light into those plants that we can then benefit from. How are you going to fuel it on a sustained basis? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we can't with ultra processed food. But then separately to that, there is also we need to think about our mitochondria. Our mitochondria
Mm,
are the battery packs of our cells. And they need nourishing with the right food, but they also need to be stimulated in the right way that we have what's known as mitochondrial biogenesis. So, this is the creation of new healthy mitochondria because we need to have high energy. And our heart and our brain, they're high in mitochondria. In fact, in the female body, for example, our ovaries have 10 times the mitochondria of the
mm.
heart and the brain. And so, from a fertility perspective, that's fundamental. Do you know what I mean? And from an aging
Yeah.
perspective, that's where our hormones are made. So, looking after our mitochondria is important in the way we eat, in the way we sleep,
Yeah.
in, the toxins, but also in the way we exercise, because doing some high intensity interval training really helps spark that mitochondrial biogenesis. There's also some supplements that have been researched. So urolithin A is an interesting compound that helps with mitophagy, which is this
Mm.
cleaning out of mitochondria. So those are some of the things as well from an energy perspective. And then there's also planning your day, right? So the way that you approach the day will dramatically impact your energy. So going outside and getting access to early morning light, this sets off the whole hormonal cascade that you need. So you want to go outside and boost those neurotransmitters, things like dopamine, which is what
Yeah.
motivates you to do quality work. So early morning light's really, really important, restricting light in the evening as well. And then looking at the way you structure your day, because if you can do deep work in the morning, that's going to be what we call high gear activity. You
Hmm.
can get a lot of focus and a lot done. You don't want to use those
Yeah.
prime hours
Absolutely.
filled with interruptions and other people's priorities.
Mm.
And one thing I would say is like, if you think of your brain as having different gears, so you've got kind of high activity, medium activity, low activity. You don't want to go from a high activity into medium gear because what that does is it causes a lot of cognitive load on the brain, and you're not seeing that
Oh,
high performance and you're not recovering. So if you're constantly going from one meeting to the next without a break, email, answering, making lots and lots of decisions and things like that, that is going to drain you, drain your cognitive resources. So you want to shift into a low gear, something that, for example, you go out and take a walk and then you completely clear that mental load. Like going for a walk, I did a great podcast on this with TJ Power, is like organizing your mental filing cabinet.
I love that.
And then you can,
Good.
it's such a good analogy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just systemizes everything. So then you can come back and you can go to the next task. Similarly, when Microsoft did some research, they put some EEG caps measuring brainwaves on individuals. And what they found is that the beta brainwave activity, which is your fast brainwave activity, really kind of heated up or sped up if you were going from one meeting to the next. Whereas when they made the meetings 50 minutes and they asked people to down regulate by taking a break, sitting in silence, doing some breath work, something like that between meetings, they didn't see the same levels of stress. And if we're really stressed, we don't make good decisions. We don't have the same attention and focus.
That's absolutely well. And when you gave that example of coffee with a cake, with a pastry, or coffee with, a healthy snack or or yogurt, I think it all comes down to the choices that we make. But for most of us to make that choice is really difficult.
Yeah. It is. And I think that's because we haven't attached enough benefit to
Mm,
it, right? I think if we understood, and this is why I'm so keen, and having the opportunity to speak to your audience and just help educate. I think if you understand and think of yourself like an
mm,
athlete
mm.
fuels
Yeah.
and recovers for high performance. So
Wow.
why would you not love yourself enough to do that for you?
Yeah.
You would never assume that an athlete could keep going without the proper fuel. You know that,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
obvious. But yet we assume, no, I can do that. I can fast until lunchtime, or I can have a pastry and a coffee and skip lunch and I'll be fine. And I can do that every day. And
That's
no, I
pretty
don't
much
expect to
going
burn
on these
out.
days. Yeah. It's going
Yeah.
on these days. A lot of people are doing that.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
super common.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned about right now also, like, the athletes also just they don't just keep going on. And then earlier also you mentioned about recovery. What does recovery look like when you said that? It was very interesting.
So we've got two kinds of recovery, really. We've got recovery that happens in a recovery session, if you like, right? So a very easy example would be you're working during the day and then you're recovering in the evening, and we can talk about what that might look like.
Hmm.
Or you've got sleep, which is also part of that process. But then we've also got intra-day recovery. So when we look at our sleep, what we can see is that our sleep works in ultradian in these 90-minute cycles approximately. So we tend to go from a high level of brainwave activity dropping into alpha and then theta and then into delta. And we go into deep sleep and then we come up again and then we drop down again. And in between, we get a little bit of REM. In the first half of the night, we're getting more deep sleep if we've got good sleep architecture. And in the second half of the night, we're getting more REM sleep or REM sleep.
Hmm.
If we look at the day, we have this ultradian rhythm that's operating in similar 90-minute cycles. So if you're
Hmm.
going to do a block of work, you might not even be able to do 90 minutes at first, right? If your attention span, if you're constantly flipping between activities, you might find actually I'm going to have to build up to this. Maybe you can only do 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But taking some time to recover, moving your body to increase blood flow, right? Moving between a standing and sitting workstation, for example, having a walking pad, all things like this can stimulate blood flow. Doing some body weight squats, 15 body weight squats has been shown to improve glucose sensitivity. So you could do some body weight squats. And that also, when you're squatting and you do these big movements, you're getting surges in BDNF, which is like miracle grow for your brain. And
Hmm.
so that's actually fueling that attention and focus. So that's part of it. You could do some breath work if you're feeling very stressed to downregulate your nervous system. Maybe you think, I'm going to do 3 minutes of slower breathing. So 4-6 or 4-7-8 breathing. I'm going to do that for 3 minutes, 3 times a day. And that's going to help create that physiological balance, for
Hmm.
example. There's lots of ways that recovery can take place. But one of the most important things is at the end of the day, you have what's known as psychological detachment. So at some point, you need to
Wow.
have a work shut off time where
Yeah.
you psychologically detach. And
That's so
one of
hard,
the best
isn't
ways
it?
I've found, sorry,
It's so
it's
difficult to
hard.
do that.
I think in the modern society, it's really hard. And I think we've been
Yeah.
conditioned to always be on. But I think that's where, if you can place some boundaries, and I'm not saying to you, I want you to turn off and not look at anything after 5:30, 6 o'clock, because I know that a lot of high performers are going to feel very uncomfortable with that. They're like, I need to just check
Yeah.
nothing's happened. But maybe at 9:30 or 9 p.m. you can say, right, this is my cutoff, and I'm not going to look at things after this. And anything from
Great.
here
Yeah.
can wait, can wait to the morning, because you actually need that in order to recharge and to be at your best the next day. Like it's a really important principle. And you can work back to this. And then when you wake up in the morning, 15 minutes, I'm just asking, don't look at your phone for 15 minutes. Just give
Yeah.
yourself that grace. Time
Mm,
to be you. When you wake up, you are, every time you fall asleep and every time you wake up, you go through these brainwave states. And
mm,
as I mentioned, you go through theta and alpha. And that's when you are powerfully able to envision your future and what you want your future self and your life to look like.
mm,
And that's why those are special. They're sacred times when you should be thinking about you and your life and your goals and everything that you want and not other people's priorities. So I would always say protect those times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you said about two things. Number one, also had to consciously put a hard stop for my own self to not think about work after a certain time. Otherwise, what you said is true. Our brains just keep working, and there is no recovery time. Even in your sleep, you are busy. Somewhere behind your mind, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of tension. So I consciously made this practice, which you have mentioned now. And then you spoke about like a 90-minute. I wanted to check with you for our audience. Is there a certain time that we should give to a certain activity, depending on how our brain works? Like, can our brain focus in 30-minute cycle or a 60 or a 90? How does that work?
I think that's somewhat individual because I think you
Okay.
can train longer work periods. And I
Okay.
think that we know that when someone's trying to, so like McKinsey's research shows that when we are in a flow state
Hmm.
where it feels like time has fallen away and we're in that deep work, we
Hmm.
are 5 times more productive. So, in theory, if you could be in flow for the whole of Monday, you can
Hmm.
take the rest of the week off.
That's
It's
so
just that
good.
it's not. It's just that not many people are going to sustain that level of flow. So
Yeah.
you're 5 times more productive, right? So
Yeah.
what we need to do then is facilitate that flow state as much as we can. Now, to get into flow, and I interviewed Stephen Kotler on my podcast, the founder of the Flow Research Collective, on this. There is a degree of agitation, right?
Hmm.
Initially, you are going to get a lot of messages from your mind that there's some other things you need to do that are higher priority, even though they're not going to move you closer to your goals, they might feel more urgent. And so
Hmm.
that you have to kind of get over that hurdle. Just like when you pick up a fiction book, there will be some books that
Hmm.
grip you from the first page.
Yeah.
Most don't. They usually take 2 or 3 chapters. But
Hmm.
once you get into it, it's worth the effort. That's the same when you're going into deep work. What I say to people is when you're trying to develop a habit around something, like say, for example, you're like, right, great, I've listened to this podcast with Pyle and Angela. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside 90 minutes of deep work. I'm going to block it into three 30-minute blocks or 25 minutes, maybe with a five
Okay.
minute movement break.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that. Now, how do I make that into a habit? What I would say is to create what I call on ramping. So, a pre step that communicates to the brain, we're getting ready to do this. And it's the same thing
Okay.
that happens every time. So, for example, if you were going to the gym, you might always have a routine that you go onto the treadmill for 10 minutes and you
Hmm.
start warming up at first. The first step is super easy because all you've got to do is start walking. And then you start, as the blood flow starts coming, it feels easier to move the treadmill a little bit faster.
Yeah.
And then you might even move into a light jog. And by the end of that, you're ready to work out and do the hard stuff.
Yeah.
So with this situation, you could have some binaural beats, something that you prime the brain with if you wanted to. You could decide that I'm going to go and have a coffee. Maybe you cherish your coffee or your matcha. So you go and make it, and it's a ritual that you have.
Mm.
And then you sit down and you enter into that ritual and that space in a clean, calm space. And that's communicating every morning when you do that. This is time for deep work. Your brain's actually going to start to move into it easier.
Wow. I had read somewhere that if we use 100% of our brain's potential, we would be limitless.
Yeah.
So
We just don't
I
use
wish we
anywhere
would.
close to it.
No, but there's people like you who have that expertise and you're able to tell us exactly where the mistakes are, where the gaps are, and how to do it. Going ahead with the recovery, digital detox in today's times. What is digital detox? Because even when you said about the 30-minute or a 60-minute, you can sit and concentrate or work. In the age of Insta, I don't think our brains are even willing to wait at a certain post or a reel for more than 5 seconds. That's the thing that we just want to move ahead quicker to something else. Now, in this age, how do we make a digital detox day look like?
This is a very, very good question because, and I actually went into this a lot of detail with TJ Power. He's written a great book called The Dose Effect.
Mhm.
And the issue that you've got there, and actually, when we look at reels, for example, even Instagram, if it's showing you how well your reel is doing, what it
Mm.
will actually tell you in your metrics is how many people went past the first 3 seconds. And so you know that that hook has got to get you past the first
Yeah.
3 seconds. So this is why I'm saying anything that you want to achieve needs to have a very strong why, because that is your personal hook, right?
Right.
You're going to chase the
Right.
goal if the hook is strong enough. So think about how you can hook yourself into something. But when you're looking, what's happening is you're getting a cheap hit of dopamine. You didn't earn it. Before, we had to do something hard to get that release of dopamine, or we go out, we get access to sun, but it's generally because of an activity. So, one of the things that you should do is before you go on social media, in that first 15 minutes or so of the morning, or if you want to take that first 15 minutes as quiet meditation or journaling, then do something that is effortful, something that you
Mm.
earn dopamine, because the dopamine that you earn is going to last much longer. So,
Mm.
Dr. Andrew
Yeah.
Huberman's talked a lot about turning the shower on cold and warm cycles, for example. That helps with dopamine and it'll give you a few hours afterwards. If you go and do a workout, you're going to get dopamine. Even
Oh my
simple
God.
activities.
Yes.
Huh?
Absolutely. I mean, I think most of us, we forget that workout is such a great dopamine.
It's amazing. I mean, it's
Amazing,
part of my
actually.
daily practice.
Yeah,
Yeah, for that reason. It's amazing. And it just fuels high performance. But I think
true.
even you going and unloading your dishwasher in the morning
Hmm.
is reasonably effortful, right? You actually had to do something to do
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
I think, and it's quite interesting because we often start to delegate out all of the tasks that are good for our health. We hire dog walkers. Actually, walking is one of the best things that you can do for your health, your
Yeah.
mental filing cabinet, your performance. So I would look at where are you outsourcing certain things? Are they
Yeah.
beneficial to you?
True.
Because you want to do the things that are really health and there's always times we can't walk our dogs and we need that, but
Mhm.
actually that's a really good healthy behavior for you. But I think that staying off social media, getting that dopamine to naturally kick in through a stimulating activity, and
Mm.
then limit your social media time. Because I spoke to somebody, I think I was going for a treatment somewhere, and the lady doing it said to me that she didn't spend a lot of time on social media. She'd really cut down her use and she was only spending 3 hours a day.
Wow.
And I was thinking 3 hours a day is a lot. I mean, as you're just scrolling from one thing to the next, this is a
Yeah,
lot.
it is.
So I don't think anyone that your audience all about success, I'm sure they're
Yeah.
not doing that, but these little hits, particularly during the day, like you think, oh, I've just done a whole load of work, or I've just got out of a meeting, I'm just going to quickly check my socials. That's giving you a dopamine hit, and actually it doesn't last very long, which means you're then looking for the next thing and it makes it harder for you to focus.
Mm.
So I think that limiting it to certain times of day, turning your phone off,
Yeah.
away from you outside the room at night, obviously, really, really important. Reading a physical book if you can. Again, that's something that is a little bit more effortful. It's really good for us.
Yeah, I think, and that's so important. I remember in one of the media interviews, I was asked about productivity, of how do I maintain the productivity, and I gave a very simple answer. I said, me and my phone, we have a great relationship. Both of us don't disturb each other for hours together. I think because today's time where so much information is available, it's so easy to lose productivity, to lose your focus, and then we still want to be a peak performer. So I think all the suggestions which you have given is so different than what we generally hear. So Angela, before we wrap up this session, what would be your advice to our listeners who really want to succeed in their career and business?
So, what I would say, I'm going to preface this by saying you don't have to be perfect, right? Because I've given you a lot of things that I think can help. And in no way am I looking at perfectionism. In fact, I think that can be the enemy of us achieving our goals, right?
True.
So, if you can be like 80, 90% compliant, then I would say you're going to do really, really well, right, with what we've been talking about. But in terms of your question was, how can they achieve success, right?
Yeah, like
I would
what is your
say that
suggestion, your best advice?
well, so it's everything we've talked about in terms of fueling things, but I think it's also having a very clear goal that you are working on. So a strong why, that's your hook to go after it, but you need to have a very clear goal because it's the clear goal that you hold in your mind that will dictate what you say yes and what you say no to. And I think that as Steve Jobs was so well known for, we need to say no more often.
Oh,
The
yeah,
number of no's
true.
are actually going to dictate the success. And then realizing that the goal that you're looking to achieve is not going to be achieved by the person you are now. Because if it was, you would have it right now. So you
Hmm.
need to visualize that goal and look at who do I need to become? Because goals should be a psychological tool to develop you, right? That's
Yeah.
that's really important. And so who do I need to become? Who is that future version of me? And what do I need to be doing? So,
Hmm.
for example, somebody who has a really healthy body does not eat a whole load of ultra processed food. Their
Hmm.
future self is not doing that. And so you hold yourself to these standards and embody that version of you that achieves your goals. And that helps you become compliant because now there's a very clear messaging on what you want to do. And it's like, is
Yeah.
this something that moves me closer? And,
Uh,
all the things that we've been talking about are
oh,
going to be the positive things are going to move you closer, and the other things are going to keep friction there and resistance towards you actually achieving it.
absolutely. And I had so many takeaways from this session of yours, from just listening to you. And I'm sure our audience is going to love it, what you have spoken. Thank you so much, Angela, for taking the time to be here and to speak on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And this one's for our listeners. This is Angela Foster and Payal Lanjani wishing you loads of success in your career life. God bless.